Well, we can get started. Um,
Yes.
it's 7:16, so let's jump in. Okay, so calling this meeting of the Sherborn Conservation Commission to order, September 16th, 2021. Um, let's see, just in terms of the agenda, are there any topics that need to be added that could not have been reasonably anticipated 48 hours in advance?
Nothing for me.
Wonderful. All right. Does anybody have any kind of poetry or anything they want to read? If not, I've got something, but
Yes.
all right.
We're relying on you.
All right, good. It's like I always jump in there. Like I feel like there's like an act of divination if you pick a book off the shelf, open it, and it's the right poem. So here we go.
Ah,
So here we go. Um, this is from William Stafford, one of my favorite nature poets, and not necessarily super well known, but he's wonderful. So this poem is called Bifocal. Sometimes up out of this land a legend begins to move. Is it a coming near of something under love? Love is of the earth only, the surface a map of roads leading wherever go miles or little bushes nod. Not so the legend under, fixed, inexorable, deep as the darkest mine, the thick rocks won't tell. As fire burns the leaf, and out of the green appears the vein in the center line, and the legend veins under there, so the world happens twice. Once what we see it as, second it legends itself deep the way it is. All right.
thank you.
All right. So, um, we have a 720 RDA for 34 South Main. Hold on, let me. There's a couple people trying to get on. But we should start it at 7:20, which I guess is a couple minutes from now. I don't know if there's anything really quick we can do. We could talk about the warrant. So, um, on there, the warrant is just for for fees related to BSC consulting, in the amount of $5,002.18. So,
Hmm.
um, all right. So that's that. Let's see.
I guess when you have a chance, maybe you could send out that invoice. I'd like to see.
Uh, you mean BSC's invoice or the warrant?
Yes, the BSC's invoice when you have it.
Absolutely, I can certainly circulate that. Um, okay, so let's see. It is still 7:08. Oh, no, it's 7:19. So, well, why don't we do should we do the 34 South Main Street RDA?
Yes.
Okay.
Neil, it's not an RDA. Jean had asked to put it on the agenda to discuss. They filed an RDA application, which will be on our next agenda, but
Okay.
open enforcement order.
Okay, so what are we discussing?
Well, I invited the homeowner. I don't see them yet. They were going to give us a status update to see how much work had been completed or what they had started. I don't know if Joyce had a chance to go by or not.
I have some pictures if I can share my screen.
Please.
So I did go out and look at the property, and the driveway is completed, as is the spur. Can you see the picture on my screen?
Yes.
And so, and they put, what they did was, they did a smaller spur than what they had spoken of in the meeting. They also built a raised retaining wall at the end of the spur, and the erosion control barriers up. They put, so we talked about monuments we talked about putting them behind the wall, but they've set a couple of posts in the yard upon which they intend to affix things. I didn't think they were in particularly, well, they're certainly not convenient spots for the homeowner. Originally, we talked about putting them behind the wall, more along the 50-foot that kind of ran along the tree line. I did see the homeowner on site today, and
I think he's actually joined, Joyce.
has he? Okay,
Yes.
so I don't know. We originally talked about it being again along the back edge. We also talked about some shrubs along this area. They talked about plantings. But I don't believe they've, it's hard right now to get plantings. Those are one of the things that COVID has caused, is there isn't a great amount of stock of native material. Like New England wetland plants are low on their stock. We tried New England wildflower, one in Framingham, and so I don't think they've picked their plants yet, but they do intend to put them in. So I'm just trying to see if I have another look. So basically, this was where the rubber wall was right here. They ended the spur back here, so I think they've kept it well within the limits of what they talked about the first time around. And now it's just a case of putting in the plantings, the shrubs that we had talked about.
Okay. So are we, I mean, so obviously the work has begun.
Yes. And everything is, they got their erosion control up, it's stabilized.
Okay. So Elizabeth is then, oh, Cindy, I'm sorry, go ahead, you have a question?
I do have a question, but maybe it pertains more to the RDA. I was just, well, I guess my question is about, I think it pertains more to the RDA, so I'm gonna wait. I'll lower my hand now, sorry.
That's okay.
So one of the things I did point out to the homeowner was that these posts here were going to be along this line. I also suggested that the RDA might add more along beside where the shed was being expanded, but that would be for the next meeting.
So if I might ask a question about the monuments, are you worried that it's just going to be, they're sort of going to get lost where they've been placed? Is that?
I'm not sure it like acts as a, well, I don't know. There's a marker there, but wouldn't it be better to have it as you head to the 50? These are more out along the outer limits.
So, hi, I'm John. I'm the homeowner. Those markers are there only because that's what was in the plan. That's what the board approved, the conservation committee. We'll gladly move those posts. I mean, really, they're kind of an eyesore where they are. Like, it'd be nicer if they were on that outer perimeter, as Joyce had suggested to me when I saw her today. Yeah, not a problem, right? They're only there because that's what was on the original plan that was submitted and we talked about a while back. The two markers, yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I agree with what you're saying, Joyce, which is that it'd be probably more effective to have them kind of lined up along the 50-foot versus, sort of scattered a little bit on the edge of the driveway.
I have to get off. I have to leave the meeting.
So, okay. So in terms of the RDA though, Elizabeth, are we just sort of talking about whether or not we now are willing to accept the RDA?
Yes.
Okay. I don't think it needs a motion necessarily, but well, maybe we should. But what do other commissioners think? Do you feel like that there's been enough progress made on this portion of it for the enforcement that we can go ahead and allow them to submit it? Cindy?
One thing that we were talking about is making sure that at least the plants were planted. I don't know how other commissioners feel about that. I hear what Joyce is saying that.
Cindy, excuse me. I don't mean to interject, but I missed, I guess I logged on for I thought it was 7:20. I would have been here sooner. And I heard something about the plantings. So regarding the plantings, 2 weeks ago, Tim Drake, through Karen, sent a revised planting list. I believe he sent it to Joyce. I don't know if Joyce, if you had received that revised planting list. And the reason being is Tim had noticed the lack of sunlight in the area where the plantings were supposed to be. So he changed out some of the plants, all of which were equal swaps from the category A to category A, category B to category B, category C to category C. And he was waiting for just an approval on those plantings. And that's why there's nothing been planted as of right now.
Right,
We were ready to, I just talked to Tim today, and we're just kind of waiting to see if the swap out on those plants are good, and then we're ready to put them in.
Okay, so I think Cindy's question really just is, regardless of why, I think she's just asking, should we wait until plants go in before we would sort of allow the RDA application? I don't know if other people have any thoughts, Michael or Courtney or Carol.
I think in similar situations where people have made a good effort and things are in progress, we've gone forward with things. It's, I mean, as long as things are moving forward, it's like we're still on track, and I don't really have a big problem starting to consider another application. It would be different if nothing was happening,
Right.
Working on it. It's coming together, and so far so good, right?
Okay. Michael or Carol, do you have thoughts? Cindy also, obviously.
I'm fine with what Courtney said.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think I'm inclined to agree as well. I think, obviously work is going forward. We're not sort of, because really what the big concern is not so much exactly what stage they're in necessarily, at least in my mind, but more just that progress is being made, that we, good faith effort is underway, I guess is the way to put it. Okay, so why don't I do this? I'm going to make a motion. I move that we allow for the RDA application to be accepted, that sufficient progress has been made on the enforcement to allow it.
Second.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Don, can you, there we go. Like anyone who's not speaking should mute.
Yeah, it's weird. There's this weird delay, and then I'm hearing myself talk.
Yeah. You're in the matrix.
Hold
So
on a second.
Are we moved and seconded?
Yes.
Okay.
We are.
Discussion.
All right, right. Any discussion?
Yeah.
All right. All those in favor, Neil, aye. Michael?
Aye.
Courtney?
Aye.
Carol?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries. So John, you can go ahead and submit your RDA for whatever the next meeting is, whenever you're ready.
Okay, and just the thing on the plantings, can I go ahead and start putting in the plantings that we have? Is that, because we did change it?
Well,
So,
And they were basic swap outs, A to A, B to B,
hold
C
on.
to C.
Joyce just wants to comment on that because I don't think she has seen the revised.
no, so
the
John,
revised-
I just searched my email and I don't have anything on plantings, but all emails should go to Elizabeth, Conservation, at Sherborn. So, I have not seen it. I'm be happy to look at it
Okay.
and just check it over, and that won't take very long.
Joyce, do you also need feedback from us about the monument posts? Is that,
No, I think we can talk about that. as
Okay,
we,
so I'll make sure that
no?
You are breaking up quite a bit there, John. So yes, let's correspond with Joyce so you can get the list straightened out. Okay.
Good old Zoom.
Yeah, this is very strange. I find if I'm muting myself, I don't hear that feedback, but maybe that's just.
I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, so I'm planning, and I can move those. Can you hear
Yes.
me?
Yep, just
Yes.
in touch with Joyce.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll make sure that,
Yes. Thank you.
thank you.
All right. It's
That's
back
good.
to the 80s with Max Headroom. All right, so if anybody gets that reference, then you're old enough. You passed the elderly test. All right, let's see. So we are continuing our hearing into Coolidge Crossing, and I can see we've got everybody here who would like to be here. Okay, so just as an FYI, I did go back and watch the recording from the previous meeting, and as you know, it's a condition to be able to vote on the project, to attest to the fact that you've done so. I have done it. I don't know how many hours it was, but it was not short. But I did listen to it, which is very interesting on double speed, but it works. So I think we should all just talk really fast. But so basically, what I figured, because I wasn't at the last meeting, what I'd like to do is just sort of encapsulate where I think we are right now. And then obviously we have tonight to make some more progress. So my understanding is that we decided we were going to get we were going to send out RFPs to Tetra Tech and to BSC regarding a more constrained scope of work on stormwater review, specifically with an eye toward crafting special conditions related to it in the final order. That there was a memo that Matt Burns sent that encapsulated his kind of feedback from the last meeting that I think was going to elicit some feedback from the applicant, although I didn't see anything come back before the meeting, so we can talk about that. I will also tell you that I don't think, and Matt, you can correct me because I know it's coming from a different person, I don't think we got from Dom an actual estimate as of the meeting tonight. We did get one back from Tetra Tech, but I don't think we have one yet from Dom.
That's my understanding.
Okay. And then I know that we, specific to the kind of comments that Matt Byrne made, that there was some talking, getting into landscape plans and, wildlife passageways and that kind of stuff. And so I feel like that's going to sort of form the substance of what we talk about tonight. But there are a couple of things on the housekeeping side that we'll need to attend to. And let's see, I sort of have a couple different things floating through my head. For those of you that looked at the Tetra Tech estimate, am I right in remembering it was around $4,000? But that the scope, as Michael pointed out in an email, I think was maybe off in terms of what they were proposing to do. Maybe Michael, you can comment on that briefly.
I concur with that.
Right. I mean, I don't know. I didn't see what was sent out to him, to Tetra Tech, but it didn't seem responsive to what we talked about in terms of that we were really just wanted task 2 of their scope there. And whether we should have, whether we need to get something back from them or or talk to them about, since it was signed by the people who participated in the ZBA process. So I'm not quite sure why they submitted something like that, for something that was a much more limited focus. So, but yes, it was really just task 2 that I think we were trying to get at. So we need to, and we haven't gotten the thing from BSC either. So I don't know whether at this point we just have to leave that behind and do some work on it for the next meeting.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's where.
So we don't waste our time tonight.
Right. And I think that's where we are. I think we're just going to need to postpone it because obviously one of them is wrong in scope and the other is we don't have yet. So both of them are not going to be all that useful to talk about. Okay. So that's that. The next thing that I wanted to raise was the fact that we're sort of, in terms of Matt Burns' time, we've had more maybe meeting attendance and there's some other things. So he sent along basically a change order because he's basically running out of the initial outlay of funds. And so I just wanted to let folks know that. And Matt, I'm sorry, I'm sort of just glanced at it earlier today because I'm just trying to get myself caught back up. Can you tell me give me a very high level of what's in the change order or the change request?
I should have pulled that up before the meeting. It was really, we're in our, I think, the 4th meeting now. And we had originally scoped 2.
Yes.
So it was really just to put the funds in for these meetings, and you know, I'm presuming we're not going to be completed tonight. So I forget exactly how many I scoped out, but I think an additional 3 meetings,
Okay.
you know, just to get us so that we're, you know, I'm not robbing one task to cover another task, that kind of thing.
Okay.
If there are any questions, or you need to dig into the numbers, you know, after the commission has had a chance to review it, by all means, we can chat.
Okay. And what's the dollar amount fixed to it?
I don't remember.
Let me look, because I actually have it here. Fees for services, 2,400. Okay. All right. So an additional $2,400. I don't know who on the commission has had an opportunity to review that change order. If you have, we can certainly discuss it now. I mean, I understand that I understand what Matt is saying, which is, you know, there's more meetings, it's taking more time, and we still need his input and his expertise. So, I mean, I just theoretically or conceptually, I don't see it as being an issue, but I did want to sort of allow for comment.
And I'll just say, we haven't expended the entirety of the first contract. There's still money assigned to tasks that have not been done yet. The special conditions, as an example. So,
Right.
So this was really just to cover meetings and some additional stuff.
Okay.
Hi, Neil. Cindy, I did read that change order, and as you said, that it's just taking longer. So it, you know, logically it makes sense.
Okay.
And so I agree with what you stated earlier.
Okay. Just from the applicant's perspective, are there anything that stands out to you as an issue with this?
First off, through the chair, we have never seen it, so I'm not quite sure how to comment on it.
Okay.
I mean, if you could send us a copy so we understand, you know, what is it for? What are the hourly rates? How many meetings we anticipating? I think that'd be very helpful.
Sure.
And the other thing is, I think it was fairly clear, at least from our perspective, that the proposal going out to Tetra Tech and to BSC was for the purposes of working with the commission in drafting the order of conditions, not revisiting the stormwater. So I don't know what message that Tetra Tech got, but it sounds like they're looking at 2 tasks, not 1.
Right, and I think where there may have been some confusion is that the limited scope of work we asked for the estimate on was really even more constrained than that. It was special conditions specifically related to stormwater.
Yes.
And so, right. So, yeah, no, I think something got missed in the communication. So that's something we'll fix with them, but we just haven't had a chance to circle back.
Okay.
Okay. And then, so I'm happy to send you the proposal.
I appreciate that. Do you
yeah.
mind if I comment on a few expectations, at least I perceived as coming out of the last meeting?
Yes. Can you, if it's related specifically to this change order, I would.
No, it's not.
Then, if you don't mind, let me finish with this, and then we'll turn to your input there, because as I was saying, I'm happy to sort of set the framework for what we're going to talk about tonight, and I'm happy to have your input on that. Okay. So, any other comments from commission members? Okay. I guess I'll do it as a motion. I move that we authorize the additional $2,400 expenditure for the added meetings that we anticipate, and whatever else is contained in the change order. Michael, you're muted.
Unless you were moving your mouth for another reason.
Yeah, no. I guess it's a matter of whether we wait till we see what the applicant, if there's any issues with the applicant. Because I assume the budget is not to be expended before the next meeting, if I understood it right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we always get into this sort of same discussion, which is if the commission feels that it's a reasonable fee to get the added information we need in order to be able to adequately condition the project, I'm happy to have applicant input, but it's not really something that they kind of sign off on. That's just not how this part of it works. And so I'm happy to have their input, but I think that what's in that change order is pretty straightforward stuff. This is not some, it's just added meetings and just extra time being taken, which is obviously being taken.
For the chair, if you wouldn't mind, if you would consider just making a very simple modification to that and just saying up to, because if you don't use it, you don't need to send it.
Okay, so, all right, then I will amend my motion. I move that we approve the change order to allow for up to $2,400 more to be expended for meetings and whatever else is contained in it.
Thank you.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I'd like BSC to add, Matt, I'm not sure in there is whether you include the hourly rates and how many hours that is, how that.
Yeah, we attached a fee schedule to the original proposal that was signed.
But it wasn't clear what like you cost versus anybody else cost. The schedule is
Sure.
is
Yeah.
by position and not necessarily keyed to the people who are working on it. So
Yep, I can,
that's something that would be nice to have a refinement of.
sure enough. I can I can put that into the change order if you'd like and resend that.
Or just making an addendum in a set, either way.
Sure. No problem.
Okay.
On
Any,
the,
yes, Carol?
the only thing I'm a little concerned about with saying up to is that it might constrain us if for some reason we actually realize, well, okay, we need Matt at maybe 1 or 2 more meetings. So I guess I would, respectfully suggest that you amend it to add a phrase along the lines of, subject to the commission's future deliberation, or I don't know what the right word.
Carol, I know what you're getting at, but I think that worded this way, all we're doing is saying that tonight we are, if we vote to uphold this motion or to pass this motion, that we're saying that for this change order, we're authorizing up to $2,400, because I think Mr. McDowell's point really is that, well, what if we don't ever spend that? And then what we're saying is well, we're authorizing it anyway. So, because I think if we exhaust those funds, the $2,400, and there's still more work to be done that we think is reasonable, because that's kind of the test that we have to apply, then we could always have another change order and another motion. And I don't think the motion with the up to is constraining us from doing that in any way in the future.
Okay, that's helpful. And I think, the clarification you made that I probably didn't notice to begin with was that it's for this change order specifically.
Yes. Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. All right. So all those in favor, Neil, aye. Michael?
Aye.
Courtney?
Aye.
Carol?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. Okay, Mr. McDowell, you said you wanted to add something to help with our scoping of the discussion tonight.
Yes, well, I just want to sort of go over some things, at least our understanding of things we were supposed to do from last meeting to this meeting.
Mhm.
And we have been working on a number of fronts. One of the things we suggested, I think the board liked the idea of us adding additional planting in the buffer zone area as additional mitigation. And we are working on a plan. We'll for sure have it sometime next week for you, which we will send you in advance of the next meeting, which will show, a significant increase in the amount of planting in the buffer zone. So that's number one. Number two, we've done a lot of homework on the issue of the amphibian tunnels. And I know Matt Leidner, who can speak to it in a few minutes, has done work on that. Had some conversations, I believe, with Matt as well. And I think we can talk about that a bit this evening. One of the things, the research we did typically says when you do these types of things, there needs to be clear evidence that ideally these should be there. And we're not totally clear that is the case. We're not suggesting we won't do the tunnels, but we're saying if there isn't a need to do the tunnels, maybe we consider taking the amount of money that we would have spent on those, either additional mitigation on our site, or possibly if the board has a location where they'd like to spend funds that's appropriate for the community in lieu of doing it on our site, we consider that. But so that's another issue. I know Stephanie has been working on our proposed order of conditions that we'd send to you that we might want to see, and have the board look at them and see what your thoughts are on that. we're also working on the management of the landscape to send you as well, O&M for the landscape, which will have that for you soon as well. I think those are sort of the major points. And I didn't know if it's okay if Matt Leidner can speak briefly about the tunnels.
Yes, before he does, then I think that I just had a follow-up question because it wasn't clear from the end of the meeting from last time when I was listening to it. Were you tasked with producing any sort of documents for this evening in advance of the meeting, or was it more just you were going to go off and do research and we would sort of talk about it tonight? I just wanted to be clear just to understand how much we should have had in advance, because obviously when you're sort of hearing it for the first time, there's like the digestion and there's sort of,
Sure.
so I just wanted to ask what your understanding was.
We're very close, and to be honest with you, we didn't want to send it to you today because it would have been so late. It would have been futile, and you probably would have been annoyed. You get it, hours before the meeting.
Right.
So I'd rather tweak it, get it more closely to where it should be, and then get it to you well in advance, let's say a week in advance of the next meeting, so you and your consultants have plenty of time to absorb it.
Okay, that's reasonable. Yeah, Michael?
Before you get into specifics, or I could either do it at this point in the meeting or after going through some specifics, whether to stay on the bigger picture stuff of what you're working on. And whether, for example, I would say whether we talk now about this bigger picture of with the new landscaping plan you're talking about. And maybe we just come to that. We'll just talk about it of whether that's something that's not just more plantings, but whether that's where you're having more of the issues with overlaps with the O&M with the invasives plan, or whether there's that issue of whether to expand some of the areas that are more buffer-like there, and whether that's I guess I don't know whether to just go into those kind of specifics now, or we just march through with the wildlife and then the landscape plan and the O&M and then the long-term PPP, just sort of march through them. I can go either way, I guess.
Well, Mr. McDowell, what was Mr. Leidner going to comment on specifically?
The tunnels.
Okay, I mean, so just so just to respond to you, Michael, like when I went through and listened to the last meeting and then looked at the memo that Mr. Byrne produced, I kind of made a list of sort of 10 to 15 things that were sort of tunnels, landscape plan, plantings, between the buildings, around the wildlife, all this kind of stuff that got talked about. And I can sort of see them fitting in under larger sort of rubric, or a larger sort of category, such as a landscape plan. Like that includes, if we're going to do mitigation in some south area where we have native plantings with berries, and then there's also just plantings between buildings and all that stuff. So maybe, I feel like there might be some utility in just kind of hitting each of these items specifically and then sort of rearranging them into these larger categories later. But that's just how it's sorted out in my mind. But I'm really fine to do it either way.
Yeah, I don't care.
All right, then let's let Mr. Leidner talk about wildlife tunnels. We'll sort of tick these things off and, see how far we get.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, Commission members. Matt Leidner with Civil Design Group. Prepared to talk about the tunnels. And I think, Mr. Chairman, you would also, clearly indicated wanting to check some other boxes off. And I think I'm prepared at least to give you an update on probably many, if not all those items that you wanted to go through. So again, I think tonight we intended more for kind of like an interim update, not to spring a whole bunch of information on you at the last minute and have you digest it. So we wanted to give you a kind of a status update on where we are and where we're kind of going with each of the items and get your feedback tonight. So I'll start with the wildlife tunnels. And I did have a discussion the other day, I believe it was yesterday, actually, kind of high level with Matt Byrne, just to kind of bounce some thoughts off him and get his feedback. And I'm happy to go through that again tonight with the commission, of course. Just to kind of back up, during the comprehensive permit process with the ZBA, the applicant committed at the recommendation of the ZBA's consultant to provide 2 wildlife crossing tunnels underneath the access driveway to the project. There's 3 buildings, so that the 2 gaps between the 3 buildings were the locations that were committed to providing these tunnels. And when we initiated this process with the commission and began getting the feedback from BSC and from Matt, we quite frankly took a harder look at the design of those tunnels. So we did look at them closely with Tetra Tech at the time with the conservation with the ZBA. But based on the feedback from Matt, we did look into other data, other studies, other publications relative to these types of crossings. And we found extensive research out there, but we found that research was scattered throughout the country. So not all of it was really relevant to this particular region. So certain aspects of that information, that data is relevant, and other aspects we determined was not relevant. And we also found publications that were relevant and even published by groups in Massachusetts and in New England. So I guess the point I'm making is that there was really a wide range of information out there, and we really had to kind of sort through it and consolidate what relevant information we could take from all that information gathered and apply it to this project. We also found that even in this region, in New England or Massachusetts, the specific application of the tunnels in the various literature was variable. So we also learned that it's not a one size fits all, even within this region. It's every situation's unique, the applications are unique, the species are unique to that application. So it wasn't as straightforward as we thought it might be when we began looking further into it. So we learned and we kind of from the information we gathered, we sort of sorted through it and came up with what we thought were the most appropriate and the most applicable factors into making successful a successful tunnel or wildlife crossing for this particular project in this region. And as Roy had mentioned earlier, we're prepared to update the design to modify the tunnel design in order to fit better into what we determined were the important factors. So when we looked at the 2 different tunnels that were proposed on site, what we learned and what we determined is that one of the 2 has the potential to be modified into a tunnel that has those characteristics that are important to make it be able to function, as it should. So the one between buildings 1 and 2, so closest to Coolidge Street, that one in particular, based on where the wetlands are, based on what's going on within the proposed limit of work, there are several modifications that we can make to that tunnel to be able to kind of check off all the boxes off. So draw the wildlife to that tunnel, or create conditions that would be conducive to drawing the wildlife to that tunnel. And then the tunnel itself providing light, the required airflow, the bed conditions, so a dirt or soil floor to it as opposed to concrete, and those types of things. So we're confident that we could update that particular tunnel to really check all these boxes off and actually be a really great design. The other tunnel between 2 and 3, there are some barriers that the development program proposes that we just don't think we can provide a tunnel that would really meet all those requirements. And so our thought is to go for sort of quality of the tunnel as opposed to quantity of the tunnel. So, and I spoke, just high level again with Matt Byrne, that I think after this research, we're leaning toward, if we do focus our efforts on furthering the design of the tunnel, the crossings, really focusing our efforts on the one that we think we can really provide a great design for. And the other one, either eliminating it from the design or just leaving it the way it is, because we really, there's too many barriers to make it really a functional design from what we learned.
Matt, do you mind if I just interrupt the question?
Not at all.
If you could just sort of at a high level, just articulate what the barriers are for this second tunnel, what prevents you from providing the kind of quality passageway that you want to?
If I may share my screen, Mr. Chair?
Of course, please.
Probably describe it a little bit better. So this is the overall site plan here. The first tunnel I spoke of, the one that I believe we can really modify the design and get it into line with what seems to be, the best design in terms of this region and these particular species are that we're going for here, is the one between building 1 and 2. So it crosses right between here. And the one that I'm speaking of that I don't think we can really get to the point of being, of checking all these boxes is between buildings 2 and 3. Reason for that, to answer your question, is there's the tunnel itself is not an issue, but it's the areas leading up to each end of the tunnel. So if you look to the north of building 1, the wetland line is out here. Okay, so there's a long stretch from this wetland over to the entrance to the tunnel, and it's within the side yard of the building. So we don't have a lot of opportunity to really drop the grade and create sort of a swale and a corridor for the wildlife to be drawn to the tunnel. And then at the western end of the tunnel, it's hard to appreciate from this plan, but there's a lot of grading going on in here. There's a stormwater basin, infiltration basin here. And again, not as much so as on the right side, but there's an appreciable amount of higher terrain before it drops down toward the wetlands that it's very tight in this area, and we cannot modify the contours or the design of the infiltration basin enough to accommodate a nice corridor to the western end of that tunnel. In contrast to that, on tunnel number, I'll call it number 1, between buildings 1 and 2, this area in between building 1 and 2, it's a larger expanse. There's no stormwater basin in there. We have a lot more opportunity to be able to manipulate the grades in this area to kind of create a very defined corridor, sort of a meandering swale with sharp side slopes into it, some landscaping within it. We can grade it out to keep the surface moist, which is another feature that kind of draws the wildlife to these areas. We have a lot more opportunity to be able to do that in this area. And then on the west side of this crossing, we actually have a lot more opportunity. We can run a swale, sort of a wet swale, if you will, with the landscaping and a defined corridor through here. So from the western end of the tunnel up north and then into the wetlands area, and sort of create this long expanse that will intercept any wildlife from a fairly large portion of this wetland migrating to the east, So if our swale runs along the edge of the project, you're not just, relying on a critter to hit one single point. They can hit anywhere. If they migrate to the east, they can do it anywhere along here and find that swale and then follow that swale through the crossing. So the bottom line is, we think we can do a really great crossing and corridor scenario or situation and design between buildings 1 and 2. Between building 2 and 3, where there's constraints there that I don't think we would be able to do such a crossing. We can keep the crossing that we have on the plans the way it is, or I think it's more appropriate to eliminate that crossing and focus our efforts down in this area here. I think it would, serve the project much better, serve the resources and the wildlife within them much better. All that being said, in our research, we also discovered that the appropriateness of even putting a tunnel or a corridor like this in is really dependent on whether there's actually a need for it. So, in other words, you could design the best tunnel and corridor possible to be able to accommodate certain wildlife, but if the wildlife is not using that path today, if they're not migrating between the 2 wetlands today, then they're not going to use the tunnel because they're just simply not doing it today. So why would we accommodate that if there's not that activity happening today? So that was interesting to us, and when we looked at the existing condition, so we have a wetlands flanking each side of the development here. So the wetland on the west and this wetland on the east, they're several hundred feet apart. So there's almost 300 feet of upland that is between these 2 wetland areas, and we're not completely convinced that wildlife migrate, the small wildlife, salamanders, amphibians, that type of thing, turtles, actually migrate between those today. So while we are open and certainly willing to further this design and provide an excellent design in terms of accommodating this wildlife, what we found out is we're not sure it's a good use of resources and money. So we're willing to continue down this road. Absolutely. I mean, we're again, I talked with Matt, we're ready to go. We have a lot of ideas. But as Roy had mentioned, for the commission's consideration, we may want to consider discussing, some alternatives, even if it's some offsite, if there's a well-documented need for something in the interest of the commission, even offsite, if based on, could spend the money that they would have spent on these tunnels, but dedicate it to something else. We just want to make sure that whatever money they're spending is going toward a well-documented need, something useful, so they're committed to spending that money one way or the other. But the more research we did on this, the more we doubted whether these would actually get use. And the last thing I will say, and I'll wrap it up here, is one of the most relevant documents that we came across, which was a collaborative effort between the Mass Division of Fish and Wildlife, USGS, and some other UMass, and some other local groups. I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here, but it basically said, if you don't have that need documented on site, it really doesn't make sense to provide a tunnel. And I'm sorry, but I do recall where I was going with that. One thing that they said is quite effective in a design, and something simple. is providing at the areas where wildlife may want to migrate in lieu of tunnels is something as simple as providing a low profile curbing, so that so basically we found out the critters will make it across, roads or driveways. They will do that. It's not a complete barrier to them. They will find their way if there is a need. But in lieu of a vertical curb, providing a low profile curb like a Cape Cod berm can actually be very effective. So, one scenario that we would be willing to discuss is doing that on this design in these two areas, and then looking at focusing that money that would have been spent on the crossings on something else where this commission has more of a documented need and interest.
Okay.
Leave it at that.
Thank you, Matt. I just have a couple of questions. First is, have we done any kind of wildlife assessment or survey to find out whether there is, what species are on this site in these wetlands, and if there is any migration back and forth between these two? Do we have any data on that?
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, the applicant's wetland scientist has looked at that, and to piggyback on that, they are in the process of documenting the conditions of the buffer zone, which will include the wildlife conditions. That was a request of BSC, that it would make sense to document the conditions of the buffer zone in order to help tailor any type of mitigation to be appropriate to the buffer zone. So that is something that's been looked at, and we will be providing documentation on the characteristics of the buffer zone.
Okay. Michael, I see you have your hand up, and then I also do want to get Matt Burns' response, because obviously he spoke with Mr. Leidner, and I just like his feedback there as well. But Michael, go ahead.
No, I'd
first.
rather you have that. I just wanted to make sure that was the next thing. That was it.
Yes.
The feedback. I have some other comments, but I'd like to hear from Matt first about this option of that. There's a need, as well as the fact of the idea of whether one good site versus quality over quantity kind of thing.
Yeah. So I'd like to compliment the applicant team on some really good research. Matt and I spoke for about an hour yesterday in total. And he kind of went through what they've learned, and they've clearly done the necessary research to understand these tunnels very well. So I think they're positioned really well to come up with a good solution to the commission's desire. So I think that the constraints that Matt was explaining in the northern tunnel, when we were looking at the grading plans, I'm on board with that being a difficult tunnel to make really good. The southern tunnel, we talked about some options that would be a significant change in the overall design approach to the tunnel, which I think we'd want to see it in kind of on paper, but I think that it could be a much better design than what we're looking at presently, based on the conversation we had. I do really like the idea of Cape Cod berms in areas where you'd hope to have animals moving across the landscape. That is the vertical granite curbs are really bad for small wildlife. So in places where you're hoping things are going to move, or even to help encourage movement through particular areas, that's a really good step, just in general, but in this particular case, it would be good. One thing that definitely is a problem, when animals, I'm thinking frogs, salamanders, particularly when they attempt to cross pavement, they get squashed. They move slowly. Cars move fast. It is remarkable how many vehicle trips will happen in a small development like this, and particularly once it gets connected up to the other proposed area development. There'll likely be a lot of traffic there. So if any animals get into the road, there's a problem. Getting them out via Cape Cod berms is good. Better still having a tunnel. But again, I take the point of needing to know or wanting to know whether or not there is existing wildlife passage, up front. It's a really good piece of information to have. That kind of data takes a long time to develop, and it requires fairly extensive and intensive research. And I think you might want to, in the interest of, and this I'm just thinking about this kind of off the top, in the interest of keeping things moving, the preferred choice might be to say, yeah, there's a good chance that frogs at least are trying to get back and forth, and that in this case, having one really good crossing structure in the development would be a good mitigative measure for wildlife impacts. So that's sort of where I think I'd lean. But to the point that, if there's a high priority project that strikes the commission within town or within sort of the nearby that would really have a lot of bang for the buck in terms of improving conditions for wildlife, that might be a good option to explore. Taking the funds that would have been dedicated to a structure like this on this site and thinking about applying them elsewhere. Those are I think are the two prime options in my mind. A really good tunnel that takes care of things that may or may not be there, but probably are, at least on some level, or addressing a real high priority in the town or general vicinity.
So just, Matt, thank you for that. Just a follow-up question, because the applicant mentioned that their engineer was gonna, or the wetland scientist was gonna do some sort of existing and proposed conditions for the buffer zone, including some assessment of the presence of various wildlife. I guess my question is if you're saying that takes a while to develop, because that's at least my understanding as well, like, you have to be able, maybe you're sort of counting salamanders or, that kind of data can take a long time to gather in any sort of, reliable data. If he's putting this together, is it more just sort of speculative, like this is what is probably happening just because otherwise it would take a while?
Through the chair, I think we have a little misconstruement on DeShang, who's doing the soil analysis in the buffer zone, is what he's doing. He's not doing any analysis relative to any of the creatures that might be crossing.
Okay.
And I agree with Matt Byrne that would take a significant amount of time, probably.
Yes.
A seasonal assessment. It's the wrong time of the year to be doing it anyway.
Yeah.
I like Matt Byrne's comment about one or two options. Do a first-class tunnel with swales and everything in one location. We're happy to do that. Or if you want to use the money off-site or even somewhere else on-site, we're happy to do that either way. But I'd rather not waste 6 months trying to figure out whether the creatures are going to use it or not. I'd rather just do it or not do it, whichever is your preference.
Okay. Thank you. Michael?
I guess I'll just wander in so we can move forward. I guess since we want to give a signal to the applicant. I guess I do like the idea of one good quality crossing there, and I could see the problems with all the stormwater management issues, features for the other crossing that, and so I think the idea of whether there's something else of higher priority, I'm not sure we're going to come up with that in this term, in the short term here, and nor the study, and the fact that there is trying to be responsive to one of the major interests of the Wetland Protection Act, that I think I'd like to give the signal to the applicant to do the one quality crossing between buildings 1 and 2, which also provides a good quality buffer zone habitat, for more area there too anyway. So it sort of expands that kind of buffer zone quality in doing that. So I'd like to give him that signal. for what they move forward for the next meeting. And then, and maybe move on to other topics since it's already
Okay.
8:15.
I would
Um,
also lean that way.
Thank you, Cindy. Any other commissioners want to weigh in?
I agree with that as well. I mean, I think we can assume that the amphibians are there. They're like falling out of the trees on my head. They're everywhere. So I'd rather do it in a location that makes sense and do a good job with it.
Okay.
I would agree too, and I agree with what Courtney said. I can hear the little tree frogs out there croaking away, so I'm pretty sure they're out there.
Okay. Yeah, and I, as tantalizing as a sort of a high impact elsewhere kind of project, this going to take time to even identify, and it seems too cumbersome for what we've got here in front of us. So no, I think that's right. All right, so I don't think we need a motion, but it sounds like sort of straw poll wise that we would just sort of say to Mr. Leidner and to work with Matt Byrne just on providing one high quality tunnel and setup between buildings 1 and 2.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, definitely not abandoning outright potential movement at the second location, that northern location. Making some accommodations up there in the design with the Cape Cod berms, any plantings they can accomplish also should be on the table.
Will you tell me what a Cape Cod berm is? I imagine I can picture it from what you've said so far, but just for anybody like me who doesn't quite get what you're saying, that'd be
It's
great.
a low profile formed paved berm that does stormwater management, but is not a vertical 6-inch granite curb. So a frog coming into that is going to be stuck. A Cape Cod berm, they just go up and over.
So in terms of that second crossing, are you suggesting still to have some kind of sort of rudimentary tunnel that's already been proposed, or just do the berms and be done with it?
The latter.
Okay.
The berms with some maybe possible landscaping at the beginnings, but it seems to the extent possible, and whether there's other places that maybe the berms might be applicable besides those crossings. Although I don't know whether we want, I guess to the extent that there could be more berms than rigid, sort of vertical curbs. I don't know whether there are other places to consider that or not. But maybe we don't want to encourage it somewhere elsewhere.
The one thing that struck me as Matt was presenting tonight was west of the northernmost building. So going due north from the wetland to off-site would be another place where you might expect animals to move. So that might be a place to accommodate that with berming if possible.
Might be helpful when Matt gets a little further along in his design of all these things, if he could coordinate with you, Matt. So if there's certain locations where the two of you agree there's a berm, we can put that on the plan.
Yep, be happy to do that.
Okay. All right. What next is on the applicant's list of things they'd like to throw our way this evening?
Well, the one thing we'd like to talk about, because Todd and I did a walk of the site a couple of days ago relative to this issue of buckthorn. And there's some significant scale-wise buckthorn along the back slope. Some of them are 1 inch, 1.5 inch caliber, probably 6-7 feet tall on the slope going up the hill. On the wetlands area, there's significant amount of buckthorn, probably 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, maybe some of 3/4 of an inch, but relatively small. But there are thousands and thousands and thousands of them. And I could see us, number one, first time around, the whole thing should be brush hogged, because some of it's too big to mow. You really have to brush hog the big stuff. The other stuff in the wetlands area could be done with a tractor with a mower on it. But short of doing that once or twice a year, short of going in there with an excavator, which we don't want to do, I don't know how. I think it's physically impractical and financially beyond the realm to think you're going to go in and hand cut all that and paint all those stalks. So ideally, we'd like to see if you'd allow us to go in there and brush hog the whole thing, cut it back, and maintain it on a yearly basis.
Matt Byrne, what do you think of that idea generally?
It's a bad problem out there. It truly is. You know, one thing I might suggest, Mr. McDowell, is to just see if you can get some quotes on actual treatment, just to sort of quantify what it would take for a contractor, a landscape contractor, restoration ecologist kind of outfit to actually treat it and try to do some eradication in the wetland. Just
Now,
so you know what you're dealing with.
When you say treat it, in what means and methods are you thinking of?
Frankly, most likely, and this would be something for the commission to, I don't know how you feel about this, but most likely you're looking at a chemical treatment to deal with them. So cut and paint, as you suggested. You know, just to find out what it would cost to do it. You know, I think
we can get a quote on that.
Yeah, I think that's a good step to take. And you know, I don't want to speak for the commission. I don't know how you feel about you know, chemical treatments of invasives, but at this stage, that really is the way you would approach the buckthorn problem out there.
Yeah, I mean, generally the commission's pretty averse to it. We tend not to do it, but you know, in cases where there's no other way to control it, then I think we've at least considered it on an individual basis. But
yeah, the alternative is just letting it go, and I think you know, cutting it one or two times a year in lieu of actually treatment doesn't make the problem any better, but it's a difficult problem to deal with.
sure. Carol, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I did want to mention that, you know, we have a similar problem at the Barber Reservation, really in the land that goes toward the Sherborn rural land property. Sounds very similar, really, where there's probably thousands of buckthorn. And we had the Native Plant Trust come out, they gave us a proposal, and they did say that the only way to treat that and to restore it to diverse habitat is the use of chemicals. So I think that it is something, it's good to get the proposal and it's good for the commission to consider it.
I guess I'll follow up a little with that, and I'm wondering whether one of the issues in battling invasives in general seems to be the approach of that you put your attention where you can actually make a difference. And to some extent, even when we've talked about other properties that we manage, it's a matter of there's places to fight the battle and there's places to give up the battle. And that even with the chemicals, it's a little wary of whether we're going to get what we want to achieve in an area that's really dense. I'm wondering whether we can be a little bit more refined and differentiate whether there are places in this wetland that are worth fighting this battle versus giving up on certain places, and whether we need to somehow make that choice, because I'm not, even if we do all the chemicals, I'm worried about the effectiveness anyway, besides the fact that we're generally not wanting to use them, and whether they're really going to be that effective in their own right without repeated applications. I don't know what Matt would say, but I would say whether we can just identify some areas where it's worth fighting that battle, and where we can really get to some quality, more diverse biodiversity versus we're doing too broad, too general by saying just do it. That we basically need to refine what area we can ask for some of that kind of mitigation, whether it's even worth doing the occasional. And another thing is whether just allowing in certain areas, just doing the annual mowing, and whether that, even though that won't be great, whether that's just the best we can do that doesn't have chemical consequences, and just doing that annual cutting, the brush hog, and then just the annual cutting in certain areas, and then other areas do a little more focused attention.
Yeah, I think you're on to something there. I don't remember if it was one of the recommendations, but taking a look at the site in total and figuring out where there are, particularly at the wetland edge, the buffers, where they are clear of, or largely clear of invasive. Those would be better target areas to focus attention on in terms of addressing invasives, just to, as you're kind of thinking, or putting on the table, you pick those spots that aren't yet bad and you keep them not bad, and that is a good strategy in the grand scheme of things. So
Sorry, just as a follow on to that and to what Michael's saying, I know that it was discussed at the last meeting, and I think you also mentioned in your memo, Matt, that, just sort of the idea of invasives management and that being sort of a piece of mitigation or whatever category you want to put it in. But I guess my question is there, are we going to ask for, or can we ask for, or should we ask for some sort of invasives management plan so that we can fit, whether we're going to do things on sort of less impacted portions of the buffer or the wetland, or are we going to do something with buckthorn and that kind of thing? I guess that's my question.
I definitely think that's a good thing to include in the permitting. And again, I'm not sure if it was in the memo or one of the letters before, but figuring out, doing a mapping effort, figuring out where they are and where they aren't is a good starting place. And then you can make some decisions about where you should actively manage, where you should watch, what you're going to write off. A botanical survey of your invasives will tell you a density of, like, in this portion of wetland, it is so dense that we're just never going to get there, that kind of thing. So I think that's a worthwhile effort to undertake.
Okay. Michael, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I guess to move this forward, just to be more concrete for their planning, I would say whether we want them to basically, I guess I'll ask Matt one little question of whether in areas where it's particularly intensive buckthorn, do you think that just doing a brush hog and maybe an annual mow would lead in some point to some biodiversity, or whether we're just going to have a sort of a coppiced mass of buckthorn, and even if it does, do we want to keep it lower from a wetland value versus having it more treed? So I just want to give guidance about what, once we even identify the areas that are sort of too far gone, I just want to know whether from a wetland values and interests, should you even do that kind of annual thing or just let it go? And that's the best way to create some useful buffer and area.
Yeah, I don't know that, certainly in treed wetlands, they get full of buckthorn. So allowing a canopy to grow is not going to solve the problem. Keeping the open area is good. Meadow is good. So regular annual cutting will keep it open. I don't know if this has been tested or tried, but could you overseed with wetland plants, forbs and so forth, and cut and then seed, and do that a couple of times and try to get some competition from native plants to outcompete them over a long term. I don't know if that's been done. I don't know if there's any science on that. It might be something to look into.
Well, then that is whether, I guess I'll say that whether we should give them for the landscape O&M or the landscape plan, whether we want to just move this along, whether we want to say that the idea of brush hogging areas that are just very intensive buckthorn, to basically do the brush hog and do an annual cutting. I think maybe I can't tell whether from the applicant's point of view in terms of aesthetics, whether they would like that in any case, basically allowing that to do and to add in something of trying, very, I don't think it'll be very costly to do that kind of overseeding.
Well,
With the mowing.
If I could, from our perspective, the area now that's a wetland meadow,
Hmm.
I frankly, we don't want to see it overtaken by anything. We think it looks nice as a meadow. And I think from animals' point of view, I think it'd be nice to have some meadow in conjunction with the woods. So we would not be opposed to mowing that once a year to keep the buckthorn. You're not going to eliminate it, but at least you'll keep it somewhat in check from spreading because you're going to keep whacking it down. As far as the hillside goes, I think that's the area where if you're going to have to give up on anything, that's probably a place to give up on it. I think you could probably brush hog that heavily one time and cut it back to some degree and control it. But I think the meadow, if anything's worth, containing, I think it's a meadow area in terms of mowing it once a year. So in fact, I think the idea of hydro seeding over it once you mow it probably in the spring, is 50% of that aggressive seed takes over, then it's a benefit.
So I know, Michael, you're sort of referencing kind of moving things along. I guess my question is do we have a clear sense of, if we're talking about invasives management, which is the category that this is fitting into in my mind, do we have a clear sense of, and if we're going to do invasives management as part of landscape plan and also part of mitigation, do we have a clear sense yet of where invasives are and where they sort of fit into these categories of let it go or watch or actively manage? Because I feel like we're getting into the details of one particular thing, whereas I don't know how much the applicant has done or was planning to do around invasives management, and maybe the applicant can comment on that before I go further.
Well, I think what would be helpful, I'd like to take our plan and we'll go out there and delineate in our mind the area that I'll call the wetland meadow area is one area. And then the slope behind it, we'll sort of balloon that as a second area and come back with our proposal of mowing this one time, probably, I'm just guessing the hillside, brush hogging it, and then mowing the field once a year, but defining the two areas for that discussion. So it isn't just arbitrary.
Right. And the only thing I was thinking is that if you have Dr. Wang out there sort of documenting the conditions of the buffer zone generally, I imagine you could do a little bit of piggybacking and, just sort of have, sort of presence of invasives, what kind, density, that sort of stuff. Is that something that we can ask him to document for us?
I think when we go out and do the balloon plan, we'll have him come with us and we'll document that.
Okay.
He already finished his other survey, but I guess when we go out, we can have him come back with us.
Okay. Matt Byrne, does that seem reasonable to you?
Yeah, I think that's very good information, and that can help, in conjunction with what Roy is talking about with regard to the meadow management in the hillside. You can think about other areas that, as we were talking about earlier, that might not have invasives yet and might be really worth putting effort into protecting from them.
Okay. Great.
Michael,
Michael, did you have a comment?
Yeah, no, I was just wondering, in the wetlands, I guess, Matt, when you did your work, at Burn, did you feel like the whole meadow is, I can't remember myself, is riddled with invasives so that basically we're going to need that kind of annual mowing just to keep the woody stuff out versus there are parts of the meadow that have somehow escaped it, or basically we can look at the meadow as a monolithic thing there versus differentiate parts.
Yeah, yes, I think it's pretty monolithic in regard to having buckthorn present.
Okay, so what Roy is talking about makes sense then in terms of the big balloons.
Having walked it 2 days ago, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there are some other species mixed in.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not a monolith of buckthorn, but it's pretty thick.
But the other species that we like or that are good for the wetland, those are ones that would do well and survive well even with the annual mowing.
We got some raspberries there as well.
Yeah.
So the annual mowing should work for inhibiting some of the invasives as well as being not a detriment to the good species.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, good.
All right. Well,
We'll do that plan and bring it back to you.
great. Thank you. I guess I would say, since we have about 10 minutes left for tonight, what else would be important for us to touch on from the applicant's perspective, given what research you've done so far? Or frankly, Matt Byrne, if you want to chime in and raise anything particular, go ahead.
I defer to the applicant
Okay.
for this moment. Yeah.
Okay, so my understanding that we need to do for the next meeting, number one, do this plan with the invasives that we just talked about in delineation. Number two, Matt Leidner will work in conjunction with Matt Byrne on doing a more definitive tunnel and swale for our amphibious friends. And we'll get you the O&M and we'll get you our comments from Stephanie on the order conditions. And we'll also get you the revised mitigation planting plan on the buffer zone.
Okay.
I'd like to add whether you can update the long-term pollution prevention plan in the stormwater, whether that could be updated to reflect things in the that came out of the ZBA process in terms of de-icing chemicals, in terms of use of landscape. I mean, maybe the landscaping use of pesticides and fertilizers, I guess, could be part of the landscaping O&M
It is.
as well. And so we'll see that. There was just some issues about what de-icing materials could be used. And then, and I'm assuming whether you want to come back, I guess maybe it's part of Stephanie's thing of whether we talked about before having the fill and stump local regulations from our bylaw, but and just to refine the whether that'll be a part of that is the sort of, especially in terms of the fill issues, because I guess there was an issue of timing of testing and stuff, but whether that would be that should be part of that next round, hopefully.
One other item, if I could, I know there was concern about once the decision is made that there isn't any more building on the perimeter of what we've got approved here. And I asked Stephanie to take a look at that. Rather than doing a CR on the property can be quite cumbersome and takes quite a bit of time and needs state approval, et cetera. And I think Stephanie has some proposed language that either we could add to our deed or could be done simply in your decision to cover that issue without any concern. Stephanie, do you want to speak to that? Through the chair, is that okay?
You're on mute, Stephanie.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Exactly. Just to kind of dovetail into what Roy had said, that kind of the traditional conservation restriction process is, you know, a little bit of a long process and can be timely and costly. But I think that kind of what the commission's concerns that we heard, they're pretty straightforward. Basically, it's you just don't want, you know, further buildings to go into that area. And so we were looking at this two ways. One, just simply putting it within the conditions and having it be a condition that survives. Or secondly, that it goes onto the deed. I think the easier one really is that it goes within the order of conditions as a condition. And we can, you know, propose the language and you know, work with you for that. But we just wanted to raise it because I know that at a prior hearing, we talked about potentially a CR. And I think that this is what you're looking for is pretty streamlined. And so I think that, you know, we can just put it within in the order itself.
Matt Byrne, how do you feel about that?
I had thought about a condition in the order because that is recorded at the registry.
Exactly.
I don't know if it's easily enforceable. I don't know if I don't know. So I'd be happy to kind of explore that on my end and see if I can get any kind of reaction from people that have, you know, used that in the past. So that would be something definitely to explore. A deed restriction, you know, is good, but they expire at 30 years. You have to renew them, and 30 years from now, that might not be on someone's radar. So that, you know, if you're thinking long term, well past our timeframe. Both of those mechanisms leave little to be desired. Not saying they should be taken off the table, but they're not perfect.
Let's do this then. Matt, if you can do a little bit of digging on your side to just find out if people have experience of it, and then Stephanie, we're happy to see some proposed language and consider it.
Okay, sure. And just by way of example, Mr. Chairman, I've dealt with this type of conditioning before within, well, actually like a subdivision or a condition on an A&R actually, and it was litigated up and it was held to hold. So I don't know if that gives you any comfort, but just.
And if you're going to craft some language, if you wouldn't even mind sending along a reference to that so we can just see kind of how that played out, that'd be great. Really helpful.
Okay. Sure.
For the chair, I could also say we did something very similar in Hopkinton on 500 acres. And the truth be told, if you record something like that, no bank is ever going to finance anything you ever want to build on it anyway. So for de facto reasons, it's just not going to happen.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I hope I speak for the rest of the commission in saying that I think that's let's take a look at it and we can sort of talk it through next time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anything else? Because we've got a couple minutes left for tonight, anyway. If not, I'll move that we continue the hearing, and then this is where things get a little thorny for us. Elizabeth, do we have dates yet? I know that we talked about, we basically have a conflict with the select board, I think in the first Thursday of October. Is that right?
It is. So we were thinking the 2nd and 4th for October. So it would be the 14th.
Okay. So if the applicant is amenable to, there's in Sherborn, we've been trying to offset these meetings so there's no overlap in case others want to attend other meetings. So we were going to push our meetings to the 2nd and 4th Thursdays beginning in October. So would you be comfortable for us to continue to the 14th?
Are you having a meeting at the end of this month?
No.
No. So you're having a meeting in about a month.
That's the way it's shaping up.
Okay, and you're saying that's what, October 14th?
October 14th.
Okay. Okay.
All right, so I move that we continue this hearing to October 14th at what time, Elizabeth?
8 p.m.
8 p.m. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All those in favor, Neil, aye. Michael?
Aye.
Courtney?
Aye.
Carol?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
All right, the motion carries. All right, thank you, everybody. We'll look forward to seeing more documentation and keeping our conversation going. I feel like this is a good, productive hearing tonight.
Thank you very much.
All right, have a good night.
You too, bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. If you have any questions or want to talk anything through from here, please let me know.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't know if I should reach out to Dom about this stormwater thing or.
Yeah, so I sent him an email. It was after 5 o'clock, I think today. I was out in the field all day, but I'm happy to pursue it. But I'd recommend you as well.
Okay.
Just to put it on your, I think the original scope, if I remember correctly, we had a scope of $2,600 for a complete peer review of
Yes.
of that. So I think it should be. I mean, he's behind the 8 ball because he's not familiar with the plan, but it should be less than that at least.
Right. That's what I would hope.
Yes.
Me too.
Otherwise, we're really doing it wrong. But yes,
Right.
absolutely.
So
Okay.
We'll pursue him and we'll get something out of him, I'm sure.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate your help.
You're welcome. We'll see
All
you.
right. Good night. All right. Where are we? Let me get my handy dandy agenda. All right. This is 116 Farm Road. We're reviewing an order of conditions. What is that? What are we doing there?
So I just put together the special conditions. Michael, I emailed them to you. I don't know if you had a.
Oh, you only emailed it to me. I did look at them. Oh, I didn't realize it was only me.
No, I emailed it to several people, but I knew you were the master of manipulating. So if you wouldn't mind bringing that up.
Oh, okay, sure, I can do that. I had no,
So what I did, Elizabeth had sent me the special conditions that had been prepared for 120. And so I went through this. Some of them didn't apply, some things I added. And if we could just go through this, I think that's the next step. That was what we were, our goal for. So in
Right.
this, the difference here was that they were reconstructing the stone wall along our farm pond, and in this particular case, we're stabilizing the beach. So I just changed it to reflect that. The other one talked about dewatering, and there should be no dewatering for this. If there is, then there's a problem of dewatering the entire lake pond. I also put a line in here about access. They have required permission to access the project from an abutter, and if that access, if that access becomes if they withhold that, if the abutter decides that they no longer are supplying that, then this order should be suspended until they find appropriate access. I think the rest of it was pretty straightforward.
right,
But I think that was the key. Key here was the access part of it.
yeah, it made sense to me what I read. I mean, I obviously didn't have much time, but it looked good there. The only issue, I mean, right, it had all the conditions and post-construction conditions here.
So the other thing I wanted to talk about briefly was an as-built plan. So there's a call for there to be an as-built plan. I think it would be pictures in this case. I mean, this homeowner, they're trying to address an erosion issue, and we put together we work with them to put together sketches, and they're not really changing anything. I think it would be a case of pictures to the photos to the file rather than an as-built plan.
Yeah, for something like this, I would much rather have pictures.
Okay, so I think that the number 4 would change to.
Yeah, we need to rewrite this. This should be rewritten, right, changed.
So we could actually eliminate 4 entirely because there's post-construction photos in number 3.
Oh, yeah, I see that, right. Yeah, maybe we can just do away with 4. I agree. The only other thing is about what's the issue with any equipment? There is a reference to equipment.
So
Whether we are really, is there any equipment?
the way they described it was that they were the truck would come down to basically the beach at the abutter's property, and then they would. I'm not sure it was. That might be a mechanized wheelbarrow, but not a truck that would go down the path along the beach. So it was either a wheelbarrow or a two-wheel dolly, or, but it was no vehicles that would not be going along.
Right, that was also my understanding. They were either going to do it the hard way with a wheelbarrow, or they would get something specialized that would fit on that narrow path. No large vehicles.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, you need just to do a little edit in number 29.
So number 29, that came, I was trying to decide, I wasn't sure who, there should be no equipment on the
Right.
beach. So
Right. No,
number 29 was from the other order.
Right. We should just reword that.
All right, I'm gonna add the no vehicles, no trucks or motorized vehicles along the beachfront,
Right.
along the trail or beachfront.
Right. Right, I don't know whether we need, right, well, that's all we need, because there's basically, right, once you have no equipment there, then, or vehicles, you don't have any issues with 29, so 29 will be changed.
So the
Okay.
other thing was, someone talked about, they're gonna be bringing, the idea was not to bring sand down there. The idea was to put stone to stabilize the beach. And then it might be necessary to bring a little bit of beach sand to backfill the stones that they put in. And they're going to be putting in some crushed stone behind the filter fabric. But we talked about there wouldn't be any stockpiling, that basically whatever they bring it down on, they put it into their whatever device they're using, and then bring it over to the area. They wouldn't be stockpiling it there. So 30 on the one next door, you had number 30, but I don't think there should be any stockpiling down there.
Right,
That was my understanding as well, that, when they're ready to bring in the gravel, they will roll a wheelbarrow down and dump it into place. There would be no stockpiling.
So I'm going to change 30 that equipment can't be stored with a 100-foot buffer zone, and there are no stockpiling of materials in the 100-foot buffer zone.
right. Okay. What else was there? Otherwise, yeah, I don't see any other issues.
So I took out, in the other order, there was a 3-year monitoring period or 2-year monitoring period, but there are no plantings here, so I don't believe that applies to this.
Well, no, we had monitoring,
Well,
but I think just to make sure that everything was stable.
right. Well, no, it talks about 2 years or until it was stabilized.
Well, right now 27 has.
Right, so
Oh,
that was my
okay.
question. I mean, we talked about it. So do we want to talk about monitoring it for 2 years to make sure that this is a suitable solution?
Yeah, the wording is a little strange there, whether it's,
Yeah, I didn't change this one.
yeah, no, right, obviously we could have.
I have a question.
Oh,
What did
yeah.
we do with the other property that did the same thing, just stones throw away? Did we monitor that for 2 years for erosion?
Well, I don't know if that was followed through on, but this is the condition from that order.
We have not, I don't think we've had it, I don't know if we had a certificate of compliance for that yet. So we would go down and so when they're requested for a COC, then we would look at it. The question is whether we have a minimum of 2 years or whether we're willing to do less if they could show that it looks quite stable before then.
For any project,
the site should be monitored for a period of 2 years or until documentation that it's stable or something. I'm trying to figure out whether we're trying to do 2 years or whether they can come before us sooner if we go out and decide that it looks quite stable. I guess I don't mind the 2-year period just to make sure that things all settle in and with all the rain events. Or until such time, I'm trying to think of whether we need to work a minimum of 2 years to ensure whether we want to just drop the wording from here. Whether we should drop that highlighted area there and just keep it as a 2-year monitoring just to make sure everything does settle and we don't get erosion or other problems. I'd be willing to just leave it at a 2-year period.
Yeah, I mean, I could go with that.
Why don't we just delete that part there to make it cleaner? Does that make more sense?
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. Does it even need to say for a minimum period of 2 years?
We could just say a period of 2 years.
Yeah, yeah, just to clean it up even more.
You can drop minimum too.
Mm.
Okay, any other things that you'd want to highlight that we might have that are worth reviewing?
Hey, Michael, I'm just reading in number 29. It doesn't make sense that second sentence should
We
say,
already agreed to getting rid of it. We're getting rid of that.
Yep.
oh, you're getting rid of the whole
We
thing.
already decided that we're getting rid of that part. That
That at no point will equipment be permitted?
So what I'm getting rid of is it's gonna say at no time, where am I, 29? No, it's gonna say, all work shall be conducted from the shoreline and that no vehicles are allowed on, I added the no vehicles, statement in there.
Okay, so is the at no point will equipment be permitted to operate below the blah, blah, blah?
That's coming out because that,
Okay, that's what I want to know.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yep,
Yeah.
good. Thank you.
okay. Post-construction all makes sense, and we're dropping number 4 at the bottom there. Okay. Okay. I guess we don't have to do any vote. This is basically just the order of conditions that we'll just send file now. I don't think we have to vote on this thing because we've already voted on approving the project. I think we've already voted on the findings and everything else. Didn't we do that? I guess I didn't see the last minutes.
No, we just voted on closing the hearing at the last.
Okay, so we do have to, okay. So now it's time to do our approving the project, basically. So ready, you ready, Chair? To do
Sure.
that lovely process of figuring out which set of findings and
Yeah.
that we basically approved.
Sure, I'll take a whack at it. I always forget where to start, but I'll start with D. As noted, the Sherborn Conservation Commission finds that the following conditions are necessary to protect the wetland resource. For the duration of this proposed project, the Commission orders that all work shall be performed in accordance with said conditions, and with the notice of intent referenced in the special condition section of this order. To the extent that the following conditions modify or differ from the plan, specifications, or other proposals submitted with the notice of intent, the conditions shall control. Following the review of the above referenced notice of intent and based on the information provided in this application and presented at the public hearing, this commission finds that the area in which work is proposed is significant to the following interests of the Sherborn Wetlands Bylaw: quality and quantity of public and private water supplies, quality and quantity of groundwater supplies, as well as recharge and storage areas, flood control, storm damage prevention, prevention of pollution, prevention of erosion, and wildlife habitat. Furthermore, the Sherborn Conservation Commission hereby finds that the proposed project is approved, subject to the findings and conditions contained herein and as edited this evening.
That was a
So,
motion.
what's that?
You're making that a motion.
I am making that a motion.
I second it.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor, Michael?
Aye.
Neil, aye. Carol?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Courtney?
Aye.
All right, the motion carries.
At 9 o'clock.
Look at that. That's called precision.
You got it.
Okay, great. Thank you. And 9 o'clock. Notice of intent for 211 Farm Road. Are we doing this or continuing?
We are continuing this.
All right, I move that we continue this NOI hearing to October 14th at
9:15.
9:15.
Is that, are we, is it going to be really happening then, or are we going to be continuing it again? Because that's, it bounds the.
Do we,
Coolidge
is there,
Crossing.
what, What is the status of the agent?
Do we have that on our, we
We
do. October 14th, hope, fingers crossed.
The only issue I have is, again, we're supposed to get through a lot. I mean, I just
Well,
make sure we leave time to actually get through a lot of stuff on Coolidge Crossing. It seems like we're gonna have a lot of things that we could probably close to finalize.
yeah, but look, I mean, we can always, I don't know, we can always move it, can't we, to a different time? And if it's going to be continued, then anyway, it's, I don't know. I mean, you can set it for some time later, but then, Elizabeth, what do we have on the agenda before 8 o'clock?
We have the RDA for 34 South Main at 7:30.
Okay. Well, look, I've never been a fan of having a 2-hour session on anything because by the end of it, nobody can think anymore.
Only an hour and 15 minutes. Yeah, there's a big difference between an hour and 15 minutes and 2 hours, but okay.
There is. Well, look, why don't we set it for 9:30 this?
Okay.
Is that okay, Michael?
Sure.
Great. All right. So that's my motion that we continue this 211 Farm Road NOI hearing to 9:30 on the 14th of October. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All those in favor, Michael?
Aye.
Neil, aye. Cindy?
Aye.
Courtney?
Aye.
Carol?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay. I also have the town forest parking area on here. Is that a hearing of some sort, or is this more?
No, this is a discussion. I had
Okay.
asked if we could put it on as a discussion item to Karen Skinnicatoni's on the line on the Zoom meeting here, and they're trying to decide. We're trying to decide what type of application to file for this activity, and they're looking to put in a parking area for the town forest on South Main Street. And I have some pictures here of it, and they have produced a sketch that's pretty reasonable, showing more defined areas than they had with the original request for determination submission. And then there was just some questions. But this provides more dimension and detail as far as what would be constructed. And so the idea is this: there's already logs out there along. I'm pointing to the screen, and you can't see that. There's already logs around there on that existing town forest area. That's already an access way, gravel. And what they're proposing to do is to put a 20 by 60 gravel parking and in that area, so that there's places to actually define parking. You could go in there now and park, but it's really not well defined. And then if I could share my screen for a moment, and Karen, chime in if I'm speaking.
So yes, but we did submit a request for determination for this, and we did all the appropriate work associated with that. So yes, they would like to put in a new gravel driveway and parking lot, as Joyce had just mentioned. They also want to take care of a lot of invasives. There's a ton of bittersweet out there. It's just terrible. I don't know if any of the members have had an opportunity to go out. It's really trashing the trees. I do have a couple of members of the Sherborn Town Forest Committee here tonight. I have Dave Killian and Stephen Petty. And I think they can speak in more detail to that and what they have done in the past. So mainly what we'd like to do is just put in a gravel drive and parkway and parking lot and get rid of the invasives.
So can you see my picture?
Yes.
So this is the existing gravel path, And this area up into here, in between the trees, is where they're looking to put, hold on, let me zoom around. This area in here is where they're looking to put in the parking. If you look down at it, there isn't, it's either wood chips or gravel through this area right now.
Joyce, does that area slope towards the
It
street?
slopes slightly in this direction. Karen, they're gonna have to level this out and put gravel in it, so it kind of it would kind of bracket where the parking was, because they'd have to grade this a little bit to get it level to parking.
Right.
So it would provide it's a natural berm for the gravel that they would put down for parking.
So they are going to have to do some grading?
Just a little bit, because I don't have these in any, I'm sorry, they're not in great order. So you see, there is a slight, this is slightly exaggerated because I had done a wide, but it is slightly elevated, so they would have to do some slight grading. They don't have to dig things down too much, but enough to, get off the top material to put down a layer of gravel. Karen, if you have a better explanation than I'm.
So no, that's fine. Yeah, just at that roadway where it comes in, there, it does level out. And it's pretty
Right, so
level.
this is all, and this is where that row of, the row of logs runs all along the edge here. And I did take, if you look, there's bittersweet all through here, in this area through here. You can see it all coming up, and then there is bittersweet. I took, again, pictures of it coming up just around the post. This is standing in the street looking up towards the parking area. And it is going up the trees. So there's no question that, now this is another view of standing in the street by the sidewalk, looking into that. This is the area here where the parking would be.
And Joyce or Karen, if you can answer this, whoever can answer this. So Joyce, you were just pointing out all that bittersweet, both at the road and along the path and at the fence line. Is that what you're saying is going to all be removed?
So we would like to, that the bittersweet's just taken over. It's growing all through that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Meadow there. You can see it out behind the foundation. It's terrible. So we'd like to mow that down and try to maybe plant something as one of the last hearings suggested, just keep seeding and try to, outcompete that bittersweet.
So you're saying to mow everything where? Up to the tree line?
Actually, I'm gonna let, I think Dave can speak of this. Has been doing it in the past. So they want to go up
right here.
Right. So Dave, are you there?
Yeah, I'm right here. Good evening, all. So, quick history. In 1972, when I moved into Sherborn, that area that you're looking at was pristine. Shell used the pipeline used to mow it all the time, and also the neighbor next door. So that was like a lawn for years and years and years. Since the invasives have taken over, as you can see, there's trees that we're looking at right now. It's all invasives. That there's like 5 trees in there that the invasives have killed and dropped some of them into the stream. And we're trying to get rid of, the invasives, get the fire road back in, and get the, a small parking lot in there. People are using it now, not very easily because there's some log stuff in there. And so we're just trying to clean it up and, protect it. Like that area that's right there that you can look at, keep putting like field grass in there to try to take over the invasives. So, any questions?
So everything would just be mechanical in terms of getting rid of the bittersweet. It's basically just mechanically cutting it.
Right.
And so, I mean, I guess you have 2 issues of whether we're actually getting into whether we want. I mean, I think we could do this as an RDA, if that's one of the issues. I guess I'm trying to get at whether this is also, the outcome of this discussion is learning that you want to do some invasives management as well as do some work in the outer buffer zone in terms of fixing up the road and adding that gravel parking over where it's now basically wood chip.
Yeah, it's been a parking lot since 1938.
Oh, yeah, no,
Yeah.
I parked there and lots of times myself, but right, it's basically upgrading that you want to do the gravel that somehow you think you're gonna, I mean, I can't tell whether the gravel is worth it, whether you have it anyway, and whether you think that basically makes it easier to maintain it as parking, but I guess we're dealing with an RDA, whether is the issue before us really whether this could come before us as an RDA
Right.
because
So-
of the fact that
They prepared an RDA, they filed an RDA, and there was a question as to whether or not it should be an RDA notice of intent, and that's really why we're having this discussion tonight.
So Cindy, did you have a question?
Well, I just have an alternate way of looking at this than Michael, I guess I'd say. I'm wondering if because this is in the riverfront area, and because there is grading or regrading involved, if it more triggers the NOI.
Is this in Riverfront?
Well, I think that was part of our question is because there's a stream there. Is it intermittent or perennial?
I've
Joyce,
always
do you
seen
know?
it running.
This year it's been running, but other years, over the course of the years, it's dried up.
Well, isn't that a USGS designation?
Karen, do you,
Let me just go through my papers, I'm sorry.
I thought it was intermittent, but if you could
I
check
didn't
on
think
that.
I thought it was intermittent too, so let me just take a quick look.
I thought it was intermittent too, because when we were doing the forestry stewardship plan stuff. I don't think.
And I thought it was perennial because it runs, this is the stream that comes up, isn't this the stream that comes off the back of 59 North Main? I mean, it hooks into that.
No, well, I think this is
No, there's another one there. That's
There's a different one.
The other one.
Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think this one's intermittent.
So I guess.
is there
Cindy's question-
any way to confirm?
Yeah,
confirm?
yeah, if you give me just a
Actually, I
second.
submitted documentation from EP that shows it as a stream. It's just a stream, not a perennial stream.
So if it's not riverfront, I mean, I don't know, Cindy, whether you feel like, I mean, right, the grading is modest and it's already basically was used as the lumber. Landing.
What do other commissioners, I mean, I heard Michael, you, and I think Courtney, what about Carol?
I mean, I had a couple questions whether the parking is really as far away feasibly as it can be from the stream. That was one question. And then it's so hard I think it'd be good to have a site visit because it's kind of hard to tell. I think it's a great idea to remediate the bittersweet, but I think it would be good, to come up with a more specific plan on that, because if there's the possibility to use a native plant mix closer to the stream and kind of enhance that habitat with some perennials and things, I think it would be good to know whether parts have to be more heavily mowed and then maybe others are more salvageable. So I think we're talking about two different things here. But Joyce, I guess my question is to you then, having been there on the site, do you feel like that is the right place for the parking? Could it be pushed a little farther away from the stream?
I don't think it could be pushed any further away because you're getting towards the back where the stone wall is. This is kind of where the old house site was. So it's.
And the well.
It's kind of, there's a well there, yep. There's a well back there too, so you really can't go back towards that well. It's a stone well. This really is the best place to put it. It's already a previously disturbed area.
So I would say, well, I have a question for you, Joyce, and then I have just a comment before that. But, an RDA doesn't mean that's what I mean, if we look at the proposed project and under an RDA and determine that we think there's some adverse impact or the chance of it, we could require an NOI at that point. So it can always come in under an RDA. And if we determine we can condition it as an RDA without that, then that's where we end up. And it's a -3 or a +3, or not a +3, but you know, whatever that determination is, right?
Right, so I guess I wanted to get a feeling from everybody because I didn't want to prolong this, like, so I didn't want them, because they're gonna have to wait until the middle of October now. And then if we decide that it's a notice of intent, so the notice of intent, the only difference is if we can condition it, I'm thinking while I'm talking, and that's never good. So I didn't have a problem with the parking lot and an RDA. If you're comfortable with and they've always been maintaining it. It's been stated to me that they've maintained this area that they're talking about with the invasives. That's the area that comes close to the brook.
So can I just tag off of that? So it hasn't always been maintained. So when the project went forward for the logging, you know, that area was like kind of a limit of work. We hadn't talked about invasive move. It was completely overgrown. And it got cleared. And we had to, that's why we had set up some straw bales there to just kind of like delineate, okay, stay out of this area. You know, if we want to come up with a plan later, we will. So
my point wasn't so much, my point was that the gravel parking, where the limit is now, didn't concern me. I would have said an RDA was fine, but doing the invasives up to the edge of the woods line is something that I was asking you, is that something that you would be okay with under an RDA, invasives management?
Yeah.
Because they would basically be that, I believe if I'm interpreting this correctly, Dave, you're saying you would mow this area and let it try and keep it, controlling it through, I don't know, mowing, as opposed
So
to.
we would be basically be controlling it through controlling the seed bank. So we don't want the seeds to fall, and we don't want anyone new to grow. So if we mow it, and then seed it with something else, then you know, over time we could if you do get an opportunity to go out and take a look at it, it's just the bittersweet's terrible.
yeah, I mean, we visited this site.
So are you thinking of an annual mowing? So in the seeding, or are you thinking more?
So I would think, yeah, and if as long as it was done before the fruit grows, then you know that could over time, and it's going to be over time for sure. Then that could do it. I mean, it's the dropping of new seeds that of course growing of the plants, but dropping of new seeds that create more. So
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, because I remember it's so much riddled in that area with the bittersweet when I was there last year, and how much some of the pulling of the bittersweet. I mean, obviously clipping it off the trees to get that, just to cut it there and save the trees is a big deal.
that wouldn't even touch. That doesn't even touch it. It's just so overgrown with it.
I guess I have to go see again, maybe.
Yeah,
because
I'd welcome that.
Yeah, I was working there because I had to move the logs out of that area when they put them there.
So, but
the question is whether we need a site, but I guess I would still think that we could condition it as an RD. I would just go with what Neil said, is start with an RDA, but I guess, and I think we can get there, given all the fact that it's been altered and used a lot for the lumbering, for the forest stewardship. But it depends what everybody else, right? It depends what the new.
How close into the intermittent stream do you get if you're doing this invasives management?
Dave, can you speak to that?
It gets right to it, Neil,
Yeah,
because
it goes right up to it.
there's this tree stump there that's covered in bittersweet.
Right.
And it's actually dragging the stump into the water. So it's like, that's handwork to get that out of there. And then to get, hand cut the bittersweet.
Right. So I guess I would say is that to me, it's not clear cut either way. And when it's not clear cut either way, you start with an RDA. I don't know, without seeing it. And I mean, I think that's what we have to do, and hopefully we can condition it that way. It sounds like it's possible anyway.
Is there a distance from the stream that you would feel comfortable with us staying from that's not 25? Because maybe we could do some pulling, 10 feet.
Well, I think, can I mention Steve Petty? It's important to realize that the stream has been lined. When Shell Oil put the oil line in back in the 30s, they redefined that stream in that area and they lined it with stone on both sides. So it's completely enclosed as it flows through that area. And they when they removed the buildings in the area, they filled right to the stream. That whole area has been changed. It's not the original natural beauty that everyone thinks. So we want to maintain that area that was changed back in the 30s and just not let it get any worse. Simple as that.
Yeah, and I think we take that into account, that it's not a pristine area, and that's why we think that possibly this can be done with an RDA. But
Yes.
We also have to consider that, as altered as it has functioned as a habitat in a certain way, and so we kind of have to balance, going in there and disturbing things, and trying to do good by taking out the invasives. But
Yeah.
I agree with Michael that that this is the one thing that like kind of nags at me, is that we're going to be working like pretty much into the stream with this, but I think given how altered it is, and we're not talking about a big huge project, I think we can condition it with an RDA.
Yeah. So let's start there. Partly because we're out of time, but let's start there. I think that's reasonable, and I agree with Courtney and Michael and the rest that I would not sit here and tell you it can't be done with an RDA. So let's start there and see if we can work up some conditions for it.
Do we want to do a site visit, or people should just go there on their own and stuff like that, just to get a sense of the, and,
It's
but,
right off the road. We should all just.
Yeah, it's right there. If
Yeah,
people,
just do
we've
it
got
back.
a few weeks. We've got a few weeks. People can get out.
and so basically, okay, and the RDA application will specify the maintenance of just maybe the one mowing and some seeding and manual pulling of the heavier stuff to begin.
Sure.
I can envision. Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Is that
Thank you.
everything, Joyce?
Yeah, and Karen, you said that there would be no shrub cutting and no tree removal.
So just the dead trees. There's some dead trees there. There's some,
We might condition that. That's
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Some of its snags are good and just. it's
So
part of this.
the trees are dead because of the bittersweet. So the only way you can get the bittersweet out of there is to remove the tree.
Well, I mean, you can remove the bittersweet from the base and leave the vines to die,
If
Yeah.
there's not a lot of fruit.
So
Yeah,
just because I don't want us to bleed too much over into the next thing on our agenda.
Okay.
I mean, that's what kind of why I want to see the RDA. Let's see what you're proposing. We can have this conversation as part of the RDA process.
Okay, oh, so you haven't seen the RDA yet? They haven't seen the RDA, Joyce?
I don't believe they have, no, and not until it goes on the agenda.
All right, so we're gonna carry this over to the next meeting. You guys will see the site and we'll look at the RDA then?
Exactly.
Okay, so was there you have to do a publication for the legal ad, for the determination?
It's not a hearing, right?
Oh, you have to still like your stuff to
Okay,
post it.
okay.
But we do
Okay,
have to
great.
post it. Has it been?
Okay, great.
But
But it'll have to be advertised.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, all right, great. All right, so we'll talk then, Joyce, and so what's the next date is October, you said?
Yes, October 14th.
Great, okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Have a
Thank
good
you,
night.
everybody. It'd be
You
nice
too.
to clean it up there. Yep.
Yeah,
Okay. All right.
Have a good night.
Thank you. All right. So next on our agenda is COC for 121 Woodland Street.
So that's gonna be continued because they haven't, they're still working on getting monuments set.
Okay. Do we need to put a specific time on that? This isn't a hearing though, is it? It's just a COC.
Right.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm fine to put a time against it if you want to, but and it's not a continuation particularly.
Why don't we just have it under discussions for next time unless the owner is going to be here or something like that?
Well, also, before we talk about time, any more times in future meetings, can we talk about times in future meetings? Because I think that's kind of critical for our scheduling.
Well, that's our next discussion item.
Well, fancy that.
All right, let's do this. Let's not put a time against this just yet. If we need to, we will. But okay, so we've got discussions. Let's talk about the October meeting schedule, or just meeting schedule from now until the end of the year. It's too bad that Jeff Waldron's not on, because I could bust his chops about them doing it first and third Thursdays.
I already busted his chops.
Oh, good. Thank you for doing that. No, but so obviously we have a conflict now where, and I don't remember, Courtney, do you know, did the select board request and or require that there be no overlap? Is that what it is?
They don't want us to meet at the same nights as them, but we also have a little bit of it's going to be a little issue because, before we had talked about, oh, okay, you meet on the first and third, we meet on the second and fourth. When they went back and changed their minds, they went back to every 2 weeks. So that even if we're all set for October, September rolls around, if we have more than 4 weeks in a month, we're going to get back on the same schedule again. So it's still going to be an issue.
I think you need to, Neil, to talk to them about the fact that sometimes it can overlap, sometimes we won't, and to find out whether there's some particular agenda item that they want that we could try to see if we could figure it out. But the fact that it's gonna, I think for our applicants and everybody else, we need a certain regularity that they're not gonna allow us. And that,
so let me ask this question, because it goes back to the same thing. Are they requiring us to not meet on the same nights, or they just prefer that we don't? Because then there's going to be times when we do, because just from, like you're saying, from a scheduling perspective, we just have to do it then. And frankly, we have been meeting on the first and the third Thursdays from time immemorial. And not to say that the select board should move what they're doing, but I also feel like we are a regulatory body. When somebody files some kind of application, we have 21 days to respond. Like those kinds of things, we have to just manage our schedule that way. I think we're fine in October to flip-flop it, but I think Cindy, you had brought up in an email that November, the 1st and the 3rd, or the 2nd and the 4th are Thanksgiving and something else. And so
yeah, it's both holidays. One's Veterans Day and the other one's Thanksgiving. So
right. And I mean, Veterans Day, we could probably survive having a meeting on, but Thanksgiving is not going to work.
I think you should go to them and just ask them whether for November and December, we can just keep our schedule and that we've checked October.
I'm trying to actually look up the email that we got from David Williams right now. I'm trying to look that up because I think I read something about it in there, whether it's, let me look.
I don't remember it being in their discussion being an absolute as opposed to.
Yeah, I don't think it was.
That's why I think you should just talk to them, no matter what, whether they made it an absolute or not.
Yeah.
I'd almost still say, can we just change it for October and ask them?
I found it.
Go back to November and December, no matter what the email or they said.
Well, I would like to know because it modifies how I approach it. Cindy?
Okay, it just says avoid scheduling meetings at same time as select board or other regulatory bodies such as ZBA, Concom, Board of Health, Planning Board.
Okay.
All
right.
That is, they had another meeting where they said, you know what? We really need to meet every 2 weeks. And they had another vote, and I'm pretty sure they said nobody should meet the same time as us. And it may have been a mandate, but I also think, you should go and talk to them and just be like, for real, we have to hold hearings. Roy is already wondering why we're not meeting for a whole month because we have to flip-flop the schedule. I mean, surely there must be some kind of solution, especially now that, everybody can go back and watch these meetings on Zoom. And it's actually probably easier for them since they can put it on 2x speed rather than sitting these. But you know, we do need some consistency, and I don't know if we want to say, oh, okay, we'll meet on Wednesdays or Tuesdays, you know, but
Okay.
either way, I'm like, I feel like we need to meet on a schedule and not try to flip flop around the select board.
I have further clarification from that email under the executive summary number 5. All board and committees are asked to hold meetings at a time date not in conflict with the select board meetings, which are typically held on alternating Thursday nights at 7 p.m. When possible, regulatory bodies should not schedule a meeting at the same time as another regulatory body.
Okay.
This should continue for all virtual and in-person or hybrid meetings. I don't know if that lends any clarity.
Yeah, no, yes, but it still requires the conversation, so I'll have it.
Do
What's
we
that?
actually want to consider a Tuesday nights?
Tuesday nights are, Thursday nights work for me. Tuesdays,
Okay.
almost every other day is difficult for me.
Okay,
I got my wife's whole work schedule is built around that Thursday is the one day she's not coming home late. So let's do this. Let's just say that we're going to meet on the 14th of October and the 28th. And in the meantime, I will go and have a conversation, and I can circulate that information. That's not we won't discuss it, but I can update people on what the conversation resulted in. Okay?
sounds good.
Great.
Sounds good.
All right. Other things on the discussion list, agent position. Yes, Joyce.
So we have Bob Murchison here. I put him on. I had a question with you about 55 Farm.
Oh, okay. You want to do that now?
Do you have to? Could we move that up there now?
Of course.
So Bob brought his well driller out to the site to view the well that's being drilled at 55 Farm Road. And I'm going to share my screen quickly. Oops. I just about left the meeting. So if you can see the site plan that they have. So if you recall, the well is right off the edge of the driveway. And there was really just one location in which it could go. So when we all had an understanding on how the well rig would get into this, but as it turns out, the well rig is fairly large, and they need to come up the driveway, either back in or come in and access this well, either back in from this direction or pull ahead and back in and level out in this direction. And in doing that, because this well rig is fairly large and they need to be on a level grade, if they drive the well rig up in this direction, there are 2 trees that would need to be removed to access this well. They're both pine. They're fairly scrubby pine. We have some pictures. But if they were to back in from this direction, they would have to bring in some gravel to level the vehicle temporarily. So they would, again, back in off the edge of the driveway to drill this and have to bring in a certain amount of gravel to level the back of the truck while they do their drilling, do their thing, and then the gravel would get removed. And 2 trees would come out. If they come in, if they pull up the driveway and back in, they would then maneuver. There's a piece of ledge right here. It appears, I've got a picture of it. It appears closer in this plan than it is on the ground. But what they would do is they would back in and then orient the truck like this in the woods, and they're on a level field. I'm going to go now to my pictures.
How many trees would have to come out for that second alternative way?
Well, the second alternative way are two. One is a pine that is in very poor shape. And the other is an 11-inch maple that's in good shape. The other, but there's no gravel in it. So this is the pine here. This is the 11-inch maple that would have to come out as for view number for access number 2.
Joyce, I'm still seeing the,
You're still, hold on. Let me stop.
What is the gravel? Is it like 3/4 inch trap rock? What gravel is, when we're
He'll
talking
probably
gravel?
bring in 2 to, Bob, did he specify what he would bring in?
Sorry, it wasn't specified, but if you all had a preference for one type versus another, I don't see why we couldn't work with that.
He would either bring in gravel, I think, or stone, one or the other, and either would probably be just as easy to get out. So this view is the edge. I'm off the edge of the driveway. Can you see the photo now?
Yes.
So this is view number 1. This is access number 1. The well stake is over in this area here. And while it looks like it would be really easy for them to drive up the driveway and back into this point, this is a dead pine right here. And this is a declining pine. It's got very little crown on it right here. And they would back the truck in, but need to put in stone. Let me see if I can get to the other view.
But the stone could be put on some sort of fabric or whatever else and easily
It could be. Yep.
completely removed.
Yep. So this is the view. This is that 11-inch maple. The pine that's it's a 12-inch pine. Again, it's got no crown on it. It's got the electrical system on it. That sits right over here. So that would be removed. This one would be removed. They would drive in here, pull forward, and then drill it from this in this flat plane. And that would be no gravel. So going back, if they did come from this way, yes, they could put down fabric, put down their gravel, take down just these 2 trees right here, which again are not, they don't, it would be less tree damage going in this direction. It does, as Bob pointed out, they hadn't considered this way because it does bring the whole truck closer towards the wetlands, but it's not like you're in the wetlands, and it does have less, I think, impact maybe.
I have a quick question. A lot of the time when they bring in big rigs to do tree work, they put down plywood and make like a mat of plywood to go across to get the, so that it doesn't destroy lawns and that kind of thing. Is plywood something that, like, I don't know, 3/4 inch plywood or something like that, something that could be used instead of gravel to level it?
No, because
we need
it's
more
too
of
much.
we need more of a grade change. We need to raise the grade.
Oh,
It's probably at least a minimum of 2 feet.
Yeah,
anyway.
I went back, Joyce, and kind of took a look at it and also looked at it on the 1-foot topo that I have. And it appeared it was approximately 2 feet that, we needed to. Now, do they need exactly level grade? So obviously we're going to do as little as we can, but it's approximately 2 feet.
I mean, I remember those pines, and they are one is dead, and the other one is in terrible shape. And I would rather have a temporary disturbance of putting some gravel in and taking it out again and leave a perfectly intact, good-sized maple.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Courtney. I agree with Courtney.
Is this all still outside the 50? Because
I
I
think
know
this
that.
is right at the 50, isn't
Yeah,
it?
this
Right
is
out.
right at the
It's
50.
it's right on the line. Yep.
Yeah.
But when you're coming in off the driveway, you're coming from the outer toward the line, not some other.
Well, kind of parallel with it, Neil, as I recall.
Yeah. They're out of it, but they're just they're like driving along the edge.
Right, because I know the well itself, the location is right on the edge. It's just outside. So.
Well, and the well itself, Neil, it's a corner. So the 50-foot line literally comes and makes a 90-degree turn around the well site.
Okay.
Joyce, is it a red maple or a well, I was wondering if it was a Norway maple,
I think
actually.
it's a red maple.
Oh, good.
All right.
And so with the, and when, even if you did option one, you'd still put down, I guess it would still be good, as we talked about even on the other lot, putting down plywood to just avoid compaction at any point in that route in there even. That I think,
When they
even
could
if you
put
weren't
down,
doing the gravel, that hopefully you'd be putting plywood down there so that it's easier to restore afterwards. Because I think even with I can't tell even with putting down the gravel even, and then the trucks on it. I guess I think it would be nice to just have the plywood underneath at some points, just to make sure that you don't compact the soils, which is almost impossible to reverse, is my own experience.
So Michael, I just to make sure that I understand what you're saying. You're saying lay down plywood and then put the gravel on top of the plywood?
For that, as well as
Are you
just
doing
even
the-
going off the driveway and going in there for the area with no gravel, that there's plywood there.
Right.
And there's plywood underneath the gravel to possibly, as well as maybe some filter fabric or whatever.
filter fabric, I think the filter fabric is very important, because if you put the filter fabric down on top and then the plywood and then the gravel on top of that, when you pull everything up, all that herbaceous layer is still there.
Right.
Yeah.
Just mushed a little bit.
So
Yeah.
then the layers go filter fabric, plywood, gravel.
So,
or the other way, I thought.
It could be plywood. It
And
could
then
be
filter
plywood,
fabric.
filter fabric.
Yeah, I would
Whatever's
have
gonna
thought,
be easier.
I would have thought plywood first.
Yeah,
and then
that's
filter.
what I would have thought too, but whatever,
So-
it is, as long as there's plywood under wherever they're doing the well rig, and then there's fabric to deal wherever there's gravel.
before we get further down this road, my question is, did this come in under an NOI? I just don't remember.
This was a notice of intent.
Okay.
So
'Cause
under the
then-
notice of intent, when we looked out in the field, we didn't think there were any trees coming down.
No,
That's why
that I
asked to come
remember.
back in.
It's more just, this is a modification, and I'm trying to figure out, is this a minor modification? Is it a moderate modification? Because it's different how we handle it, right?
So I think it's just a minor modification for access.
Right.
I would agree.
So basically, the real difference is, moderate means we've determined there's a likelihood of an adverse impact on a wetland resource, and a minor is that we don't think there'll be much impact. And I mean, I don't know what other people feel, but I don't think the risk is any greater with this, as long as we, whatever trees get taken down, they should just, you don't want to drop them toward the wetland and that kind of stuff. So, I guess what I would say is, Joyce, I'm assuming you're aware of that, and like whatever conditions we need to put in place to, keep it a minor modification, to keep it no impact, I think that's fine.
Okay, and then Bob, we did talk about, these are two dead or declining trees. We talked about planting a couple just in the area of the well, not adjacent to the well, but in that area.
So would you crane the trees out, or was that what they would do?
Oh, they're not nearly that big, Neil.
Oh, they're not, okay. It's hard to tell from the picture, so I didn't know how high up they go. Okay. So, all right, so as long as when they pull them out, however they're doing it, just drop them away from the, toward the outer buffer, so not the other way. If they're gonna drop them, or, sometimes they climb them and just cut them off by piece, but whatever it is, let's just make sure that stuff's not going toward the wetland.
Yep.
So should we just move that it's a minor amendment and then actually specify the changes that we want?
Is that a motion I hear?
Yes. If that's,
I second it.
uh,
Any discussion? I mean, let's, as part of the discussion.
First, it's a
let's-
minor amendment, and then we'll go into what the
All right,
change will be.
so the motion is that we're gonna do this change as a minor modification, and, okay, under these following conditions: plywood, matting, stone of some sort, right?
Filter fabric.
Sorry, thank you, filter fabric.
Wait.
And then with the tree removal, just however it works, just having it removed in the outer buffer and taken off site, I guess, or taken out
Mitigation
of
of,
jurisdiction.
with the mitigation of the, some planting.
Are those two separate like, do we have to first vote that it's minor?
I think we vote that it's minor and then we condition it.
Exactly. So we should finish our
It's
vote.
two
then.
separate motions. It's really two separate motions.
Yeah. So we can stop discussing. And
Yeah, why is it two separate motions?
well,
Because
you
first you have to
it's
declare.
minor, right?
Well, we can have a motion where we determine as minor and then we impose the following
We
conditions.
can,
But
but
if you want,
it's not done that way. We haven't done
what's
it.
that? I don't know. I've heard a lot of suggestions that things are done a certain way and then I go read about it and it's
Well,
not the
there was
case,
a
but-
motion on the table to make it a minor. So can we just finish that? I feel unfinished. It's bothering me.
Sure,
Did somebody second it?
Yes.
I did.
I vote aye.
Well, hold on. All right, so Michael,
Aye.
Neil, I, Courtney, I've got an I, Carol,
Aye.
Cindy.
Aye.
Okay, that motion carries. And you wanted to make a separate motion as to impose conditions?
I move that that the changes to the order of conditions include that there's plywood put down wherever the well rig's going to be, but then there's filter fabric wherever there's going to be any gravel that's needed. There'll be allow the cutting of 2 small trees that were specified, and there'll be a replacement trees planted nearby there, and that the area will be subsequently restored to its previous condition.
If I can offer a friendly amendment, I just want to make sure that with the tree removal that they're, that the whatever's removed is taken out of jurisdiction, and that would be it.
Okay. Except that's part of the motion.
Thank you. All right. Anybody want to second that?
Second.
Thank you. All right. All those or any other discussion? Great. All those in favor, Michael?
Aye.
Neil, I. Courtney?
Aye.
Carol?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. All right, so Joyce, you've got all that, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you all very much, and thank you for taking me a little earlier. I appreciate it.
Not a problem.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Yeah, right.
All righty. Now, where were we? Agent position update.
Mm-hmm.
We have made an offer to Linda Hansen. I'm not going to jinx anything, but so far so good. We don't have a signed offer letter yet, but I'm hopeful, and we should know more, I think, next week.
Is there anything has there been any discussion with her about part-time starting, intermittent starting before, or full-time?
The discussion would be so if she accepts, the likelihood would be that she would start in the beginning of October. She does have a pre-existing trip planned, and I forget where it was, but far away. So nothing. She would like to continue to take that trip. So, but she would start at, her 35 hours right away.
Okay.
So, so that's where it stands. And like I said, she's excited about the opportunity. She's got to do a couple of last minute things to make sure she's good to go. But so far so good. Let's put it that way.
Great. Thank you for all the work on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody, including Joyce, will breathe a sigh of relief.
I'm very, very excited.
I bet you are. And I mean, this is,
maybe Jean will be excited too.
I'm sure she will. Look, I think, to be honest, I'll take this opportunity to say that not only have Joyce, Elizabeth, and Jean admirably filled in over this, God help us, 9 months. I actually think everybody on the commission has really sort of pitched in and done more than we used to do, writing conditions and everything else. And I want you to know, from where I stand, I really appreciate it. I think it's been a great group effort because it's been trying times and difficult to manage and stay sane at the same time. So thank you all for that. All right. What is next? We've got some minutes.
And they're very simple.
They are very simple, very straightforward.
Great.
I move that we accept the minutes as given.
All seconded.
Okay. Any discussion?
I could show them if people want to see them, but it was basically just the interview questions.
Okay. Yeah, then let's not worry about it. All right, all those in favor, Michael?
Aye.
Neil, aye. Cindy?
Aye.
Courtney?
Aye.
Carol?
Aye.
All right, the motion carries. Did I talk about the warrant? I did. So we did that. We talked about 55 Farm Road. There's nothing under violations. Are we up to administrative approvals?
Yeah, I did, the list on the four administrative approvals for all outside of jurisdiction.
Okay, so I know that in Jean's honor, I will read them. Because she likes it. So 51 Bogastow Brook Road, detached garage, outside of jurisdiction. 25 North Main Street, an addition on the house, outside of jurisdiction. I'm just guessing. 256 Western Avenue, garage addition, outside jurisdiction. And 47 Old Orchard, soil testing, outside of jurisdiction. Is that right?
Right.
Excellent. All right, well, in that case, I move we adjourn. This is an early meeting. I don't know what to
I'll
do with
second.
myself. Thank you, Cindy. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor, Michael?
Aye.
Neil, aye. Cindy?
Aye.
Courtney?
Aye.
Carol?
Aye.
Wonderful. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
We
Good
look
night.
forward to hearing from you next week.
What's that?
We look forward to hearing from you next week about how things go.
Oh, absolutely. You will see it flashing into your inbox as soon as I know.
Okay.
right.
Bye,
Good night.
everybody.
Good night.